It's one of the greatest sitcoms in the history of TV that people just don't talk about very much anymore. But this time out, we're going back to the House of Huxtable. Why? Because it was a great funny show, and we could all use some funny these days, right? This week, we're talking to Geoffrey Owens, who played Elvin on The Cosby Show. I'm Jerry Strauss, and this is The Laugh Track.
Do you need your weekly comedy fix? Relax while we visit the sitcoms you love, the jokes you remember, the characters you will never forget, and the stars that bring them to you. Sit back. It's the Laugh Track with Jerry Strauss.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Laugh Track with Jerry Strauss. He is I am him. We thank you so much for joining us this week. It's your weekly dose of escapism more than anything else these days, just like the TV comedies and sitcoms that we talk about each week here on the Laugh Track. We hope to give you a bit of a break from all of the craziness going on in the world. And we're going to be doing it in a very interesting way. This is a conversation that I was really interested in having about a show that unfortunately gets overlooked now on that top echelon of TV comedies. One of the greatest and most highly rated, most popular, most successful sitcoms of all time, The Cosby Show. And of course, due to the issues and the actions and the ramifications legally of everything that went on with Mr. Bill Cosby, it's a show that's kind of been swept under the rug. You don't see it a lot on TV. You don't see it pop up a lot in discussions or on best of lists or anything like that. But it's hard to forget what a great show it was and the great comedy and the great performances that came from that show, many of which had nothing to do with Bill Cosby himself, but the rest of the crew, the cast, the family, the Huxtables. So many great moments from that amazing ensemble. And we wanted to talk about it because that's a part of what we do here, especially these days with everything going on in the world. It's important. And especially considering this is a show that did so much during the 80s to kind of bridge that racial divide, if you will, and break down some of those stereotypes that, well, unfortunately have never truly disappeared. But the positivity that came from that show, undeniable, both as far as the cultural impact and just comedically. Just a classic TV comedy in every sense of the word. So, great conversation this week with Geoffrey Owens, who played Elvin. You may remember as the boyfriend, eventually the husband of Sandra Huxtable, a guy who popped up early on in the series and eventually became a regular part of the cast. And this is a great look back at a time when he was kind of evolved, his character was at its peak, and we look back at a really special two-parter called The Birth, which was really a great sampler of everything that The Cosby Show was. So, I hope that you're open to it. I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope that, it entertains you. That's all we're trying to do here on the Laugh Track. So without any further ado, it is Geoffrey Owens here on the Laugh Track.
The first thing I've been asking everyone lately is, how are you? How are you holding up? It's a unique time, and what's your life been like in the last month or so?
Well, it's as strange as it may sound, my life really isn't. I don't think my life is as different from what it usually is as other people's lives might be. And I know there are some other people out there who might be able to relate to this, but my life isn't really drastically different. And that's because my life before this crisis involved a lot of staying home. It's amazing how much staying home you do when you're unemployed. So my largely unemployed life kept me at home quite a bit, except for going out for walks or driving the car to a store or something. Exactly kind of what it is now. I mean, my favorite things to do are indoor things like reading and playing music. I both playing music, listening to music, but also playing music. Like I play guitar and blah, blah, blah. So I've been doing a lot of that recently. I get in the car and I drive here or there where I need to, like I used to. It's actually eerily similar, except for the overwhelming feeling that I am not allowed to do certain things that I might want to do. That's the thing that's most different isn't even a practical thing. It's a theoretical cloud hanging over me and everyone. Like, even if you wanted to do this now, you couldn't. and that
Right.
upsets me. But it's not really like I do that thing a lot anyway.
But the thing about the Cosby Show, and of course, I think everyone knows exactly where I'm about to go here. It's a weird thing, even today, it's a weird show to talk about because I feel like there's a lot of people who just, for whatever reason, aren't comfortable kind of embracing it in and of itself anymore for obvious reasons. And I think there's a lot of people who fall on either side of the fence about whether it's okay to go back and enjoy the show, to be able to watch the show and to laugh at the show. It's hard to find on TV. I know that there are still one or two channels that do still play it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's weird because, I mean, look, let's be honest with ourselves. Had there been no, controversy, no scandal, no legal issues, none of that, Cosby Show would be looked at easily a top 5 TV comedy of all time, I believe. I mean, it would just be upper echelon iconic, and yet we're not allowed to talk about it like that. The show is still as good as it was before. Where do you fall on that? You have such a
Well,
unique
it's
place in
interesting.
history there.
We're not allowed to talk about it, perhaps, but I'll tell you something. How people really feel about something privately is different than what they're allowed to talk about. So we may not be allowed to talk about the Cosby Show in a certain way. We may not be allowed to officially recognize it as one of the top shows of all time. But my conviction is, and this is just a hunch, that for most of those tens of millions of people, or over the decades, hundreds of millions of people who loved and admired the show, for most of them, that show still has that place in their hearts. There are some people, of course, who will reject it and want to reject it because of what happened to Mr. Cosby. But in my experience, I've had so many people say to me, I still love that show. I know this and that is true and this and that, and I'm sorry about this and that, but I love that show, and I think it's a great show, and there's nothing else like it, and blah, 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 blah. So I really feel like, in time, time is a funny thing. And in time, I think it will not only be emotionally recognized as a great show as it is, I think, still now, but I think legally, officially, it will someday be reinstated when, as a society, we are allowed to do that.
I agree, and I am one of those people you speak of. I personally feel comfortable kind of separating the reality from the quality of the writing and the performance on that show, which, of course, it was the Cosby Show, but I don't think in any way we should discredit, even beyond Mr. Cosby himself, the just the performances of everyone else, including yourself,
Sure.
in the cast. I mean, many ways that was truly a kind of an ensemble show because there were so many memorable characters, and a lot of those
Right.
plots and scenes that we all remember. It wasn't necessarily about one person. It was truly a
Absolutely.
family. Yeah.
Right.
And you, of course, you played Elvin Thibodeau. which ended up being probably the most impactful character on the show, who was not originally part of the Huxtable family. Just what an amazing character that you were allowed to kind of build and evolve over time. What was your process like? I mean, not to take up too much time with sort of the lead up,
No, that's
but
fine. That's fine.
well how did you get to the point of playing Elvin, and what originally was that character supposed to be?
I'm not sure what it was supposed to be, but I mean, people talk about process, and it's like when it comes to certain kinds of work, your process is learning your lines and making them make sense to you. Learning your lines and making them feel like they are really coming out of your mouth and out of your being. And that's a big part of the work, If you can take yourself over here and then what these writers have written for you, and when I started on the show, they weren't thinking, oh, we're writing for Geoffrey Owens. They didn't even know that Geoffrey Owens was going to be that actor until the very last minute, the way it happened. I mean, the day I got cast, I started working on my first episode, the day I was cast.
Wow. Huh.
Okay, so it wasn't like, oh, we know Geoffrey Owens' work, that Shakespeare actor, who's been doing off-Broadway and regional Shakespeare work over the last, and so we're writing we're writing Elvin, our idea of what this character might be, and then Geoffrey Owens is going to have to fit in. And the reason I got cast, I suppose, is because I was the guy who was most like what Bill and the folks on the show had in mind. That's it. I somehow read the script in my auditions the way closest to what they had in mind of the actors that they were considering. And then, my process was like, okay, these lines sometimes are what I might say, sometimes they're not what I would say as Geoffrey Owens. I've got to find a way to make all of this real to me so that it sounds real and feels real, and it feels organic and is organic in the show. So that's really the process. Now, as the years went on, the writers wrote more collaboratively with me, I suppose. They were, they got more used to the character and more used to me, and so they had more direction in terms of what they were doing. But it was always a matter of, where does Elvin and Geoffrey meet, and how does that make something that's organic within the framework of the family and the episode, etc., that'll not only be real but hopefully be funny. My character obviously was very much a foil for Bill, especially as it began. Somewhat as it went on, but especially when it began, I was the bad guy, the bad boyfriend whom he didn't want to have anything to do with his daughter. And that was the fun of it. I couldn't do anything right? And he was correcting me all the time, admonishing me. His wife admonished me in that famous first episode, her very famous, iconic admonishment of me, which is often quoted and, shown. So it was fun that I was, a bit of a nerd, but at the same time I was a macho nerd. That's kind of how I've described Elvin over the years.
Definitely. So, now, you created this character at the beginning, of course, a chauvinist, just not a super likable guy, especially, as you said, to the Huxtable parents. At what point did you know, or did you have any idea at the beginning that Elvin was going to be around for the long haul and have the potential
Not at all.
to evolve and change?
Not at all. I was hired for one episode. And
wow.
I did that one
Okay.
episode. Yes, hired for one episode. And I did that episode never thinking a moment that I would be back. Except that when the episode, the evening that we shot it, that it went very well. And Bill, at the end, we used to take a curtain call at the end of the filming in front of the live audience. And Bill said something very nice about, something to the effect of, we might see this young man again or something like that. And I went, oh, well, that's interesting. Till that moment, I'd never even considered it. And even after he said it, I don't know. I mean, I was the kind of, I'm a real pragmatist. I'm not a pessimist. I'm a real pragmatist. So when he's saying that, didn't mean anything to me. So that was a nice thing to say, but I know that doesn't mean that I'm going to be back. But 3 months later, I was back, and then 3 months after that, or something like that. I was on only 3 times that first season I was on, and then only 3 times the second season. And then the third season I was on, which was actually the 4th season of the show, I was put under contract, and I ended up being on more like 5 or 6 episodes a season. But the first 2 seasons, 3 times a season, and it was always kind of like, I don't know if I'll ever be back.
You always love to hear those stories of the character that, clearly catches on, both with the viewership and everyone behind the scenes, to the point where they do kind of change their plans and bring you, expand that role, and the opportunity becomes bigger. That's a great testament, I think, to not only the character that was developed, but your ability to inhibit it and perform it with success.
I guess so. It just worked. I guess it worked, and they liked it, and people liked it, and so they went with it. They were good enough to put me on contract my 3rd season, and I was on contract for 5 years. Not doing most of the shows each year, but kind of as I said, maybe 5, 6, 7 episodes a season, and able to do other things at the same time. Doing a lot of theater still around the show. It was a good deal.
Again, when people look back at the Cosby Show, who lived it and watched it, and think back to their favorite episodes and their favorite moments, I think that those moments are shared by a lot of different members of the cast. It's not just focused on Mr. Cosby. It's a lot of people had times to shine. Certainly, you were a part of a lot of those moments as well. You picked an episode that I really liked. I really liked the choice that you had, because it was a 2-part episode, which really gave an opportunity for an expanded story, even though not that much happened, but it was an important moment in the show's history. It was season 5. It was called simply The Birth. And this is really, to me, a big culmination of the journey that started when you debuted on the show, and the journey that you had as a person individually, and also alongside now your wife, Sandra Huxtable, your evolution to becoming parents. So it was really interesting to go back and watch that. Do you remember at that point, like, how did you feel going into the episode and knowing that this was going to essentially probably be the biggest change in your character's life?
You know what, Jerry? I probably didn't think any of that stuff. I just thought, wow, I have more lines to learn than usual. Listen, I'm serious. I'm serious. Okay, so it was season 5, which means at this point I'm on contract. I'm on kind of semi-regularly, and a kind of a double episode. It features Sandra and me. A lot of lines to learn, a lot of scenes. I've got hyperventilating to do, which I know nothing about, and I've never happened to me in real life. So I've got to, how does one hyperventilate? Got to do that in a realistic way. The show was funny that way, because over the years, the show would throw me these challenges, like, you're a wrestler. You're this. You hyperventilate. You moonwalk. You imitate Bill. These would be in the script, and I'm like, oh, that's nice. So now I have 4 days to learn how to do that, right? So hyperventilating was one of those things. So I wasn't thinking, oh, now the double episode involving the birth of our child or children. Sandra and I evolved into a deeper. It was nothing philosophical, Jerry. It's like a lot of lines, a lot of scenes. Let me hit the work and see if I can make this real and funny at the same time. It's the same old challenge. And by the way, I don't remember the episode very specifically. You just watched it, but I didn't. Yeah. I haven't seen the episode in probably 30, 25 at least, if not 30 years. So you will have
Wow.
to help jog my memory as we
Sure.
talk about this.
Sure, and we're just going to hit the high points here, but I mean, the one thing I'll say overall, it touches back to exactly what you just said. Make it funny and make it real, because there was certainly aspects of sort of the comedic side of what you brought to Elvin, the hyper nervousness, the hyperventilating. In the script you had mentioned during a talk with Mr. Huxtable that you actually on the drive to the hospital had to get out and let Sandra drive to the hospital. So there was
Right.
a lot of those jokes
That's
in there.
funny. That's actually that's funny. Now I remember that joke. Very good.
I haven't watched it in many years either. Personally, I don't think I've probably seen it since like way before I had kids. But every one of the emotions that you went through is taken to the hyper level as you did. I related to every single one of them because the beginning of the show, you and Sandra show up at the Huxtable house, and nobody thinks that it's time except you. But at this point, you're very calm. You're almost robotic. You're just watching a stopwatch and keeping track
Hmm.
of every single beat, every single step that she takes, and timing everything. Almost,
Oh yeah, it's coming. Right, it's coming back to me now. Thank you. I'm
yeah.
seeing this now.
And
And then
you're
at the end
almost,
of that scene, don't I run out of the door without her, and Cliff has to yell out of the door, "Elvin, you forgot your wife."
yes, exactly, absolutely.
I
This
don't. I run out of the door, and you hear the sound of the car start and the car take off.
It's
That's it.
fantastic. But you know what? It's like that. You flip the switch the second that it became apparent that yes, it is time. Yes, this is happening now, and you went from that super almost like meditative calm state to just
Right.
psychotically hyper. And you know, as funny as it was, I can relate. I remember the same thing, getting the call, being at work, and like your
Mhm.
mind just kind of goes blank and you become a maniac, and that's exactly how it played out. And then there's this great scene. You guys arrive at the hospital, and Sandra is very calm and she's taken to the back, but there's this scene of you trying to navigate the forms with the nurse, the paperwork, and not
Yes.
being able to correctly.
I keep saying stupid, wrong things. Now, thank you. This is coming back to me. And there was another guy who was there ahead of me. We got there. Oh, we come to the desk at the same time.
Yes.
I come to the desk at the same time as this other guy, played by an actor whose last name was Culp, and I thought he was Robert Culp's son, and he wasn't Robert Culp's son. Anyway, we have this kind of back and forth, like, no, I'm here first, no, I'm here first. And then I answer all the questions in a weird way. Yeah. That was a fun scene.
Yeah.
That was a really fun scene to do. I love that scene.
It was great, and the capper of that is when the other guy, he realizes he leaves his wife in the parking lot. He runs out. You say to the nurse something like, "Some people," before you
Yeah,
proceed
that's
to
right.
just.
That's right. Right. That's right. Oh my gosh. That's
And
right. Like.
yeah, so it's a definitive, I'd have to say, couple of episodes for the TV show. And, the rest of the family kind of trickles in. So we get different beats of just kind of slowing down. Not a whole lot happens in this episode for a two-parter. It's just kind of that waiting game a little bit of just waiting until those babies come and people arriving and
Yes.
people getting emotional. And
A lot of great
again,
conversations. A lot of great
yes,
conversations.
you had a great one with Mr. Cosby, with Mr. Huxtable, kind of just really letting it all out and talking about how your fears of kind of being destined to fail as a father, and all these things that you're worried about that very realistically drive all the paranoia and the stress that you're showing.
Yeah, I remember at
Um,
one point
and
saying to him, "What if I'm like, what if I this? What if I that?" Um,
and just sort of that the wisdom that was given to you from him was sort of just you have to go with the flow, and that's something that just that nobody as a parent would understand before they put in the time of being a parent. So all those concerns are very rational, especially with the big reveal later in the episode after the birth happens, that it is in fact twins that you guys have. And
Oh,
this is
that's right.
something
That was a surprise reveal at the end. That wasn't established at first. No one knew. That's right. That's right. That was a surprise
but
to
you
everyone.
knew. You and Sandra had known that previously it was revealed. So that kind of rationalizes even more how freaked out you were about everything, knowing that you were about to have twins. Nobody else knew that.
Oh, now I don't even remember that, Jerry. So we knew that already?
Yeah, that was revealed in the end. The doctor, the doctor who was handling you, let everyone know that you guys had been told that after way back after your first sonogram, but you had decided to keep it secret,
Oh,
to
that's
keep it as a
right. That's
surprise for
right.
all the grandparents.
That's
So
right.
yeah, I thought
Now
that
I'm remembering
was.
that lovely young actor who played the doctor.
Mhm.
TK, I think his name was. Awesome. And I remember the hyperventilating, and Bill at some point just saying to me, "Breathe in the bag, boy. Breathe in the
Yeah,
bag." Because I had that little brown paper bag to help my breathing. Breathe in the bag, boy.
yeah. And then you said you were recovered. You were in the room. You said you think you're okay. You were breathing. You've never breathed
Yeah.
better. And then she started having contractions, and you started
Contractions.
hyperventilating
Boom.
again.
There I go. Yeah.
But in the end, I mean, it obviously it all works out. The twins are born. It's not the kind of episode where there's ever any sort of suspense or jeopardy or any sort of concern
No.
that there's
No.
a medical issue. It's just sort of the feel good moment that I think the fans of that show really were accustomed to and had earned at that point, following you guys up to
Yes.
here.
Yeah. It was never like Cosby Show meets ER. It never
Right.
went there.
And it
There
was nice that it didn't.
Yeah, and you're right about the pace of that show. Not a lot happens. It was just the waiting factor. You're right, the waiting factor, which is such a key factor in these events, right? Was I think something that the writers constructed and created wonderfully. Now that I'm thinking of it, that so much of it was conversations while waiting. The actual event took relatively little time, but the waiting and that gentle kind of suspense and the conversations and the relationships was basically the heart and the soul of those episodes.
Yeah, and it's kind of appropriate because I think reality is that that's the heart and the soul of what the Cosby Show was. We grew to love the people and kind of empathize with them and relate to them and the things that they went through, just everyday life stuff. So, yeah, again, thank you so much for choosing those 2 episodes because I think that was a perfect kind of slice of looking at what that show has been. Would you want to possibly connect in the future, come back, and maybe even invite people to say questions? Because I think I think it would be really
Absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah.
That would be cool. I really want to go with your theory, and I truly believe and agree with you as well that there are so many Cosby Show fans out there who haven't had a real comfortable atmosphere to talk about the show that they loved for 8 years. I think this would be a cool opportunity to allow.
Oh, I'd love to.
So,
Well, Jerry, you and I will work that out. I
okay.
definitely have to come back. We'll
Excellent. Yeah, and we'll do it. We'll go back to the beginning when when Elvin was at his worst.
Yeah.
So that'll be a lot of fun. So, all right then, Geoffrey.
All right.
Until then, thank you so much for doing this. This was a really
Thank
fun
you so much.
conversation.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Jerry.
You too. Thanks. Have a great night.
Take care. Stay well. Be safe. And be safe, everyone listening.
Guys, the Laugh Track podcast is produced and hosted by me, Jerry Strauss, with editing and additional production by our buddy Steve Prentice.
We will be expanding in the next few weeks, guys. So keep a lookout for all kinds of big announcements. In the meantime, if you want to drop me a line, please do so. Let me know what you think of the show. Comments, questions, complaints, suggestions. Just do so, please. You can reach me at laughtrackpod@outlook.com, old-fashioned email. And Twitter. We are on Twitter, so please hit us up there. LaughTrackTV is the handle there. And again, our Facebook page as well. The Laugh Track with Jerry Strauss Facebook page is out there. We encourage you to like it and stay in touch with us that way as well. And please, wherever you get your podcast, however you are hearing this show, please subscribe. It'll ease you of the responsibility of having to remember when this show comes out, having to download it. It's going to be there automatically for you as soon as we drop new episodes. So go ahead. It's free. There's no better bargain than free. So please do that. And while you're out there, please consider leaving a review. That helps us greatly. And tell a friend. Tell two. Tell as many people as you think might be interested in this show. We have a lot of fun here. We want more and more people to join in on that fun. Until next time, folks, thank you so much for checking us out. I am Jerry Strauss. Stay safe out there. Stay well. And we'll see you next time.